Welcome to the Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. I'm Suzanne Neufang, CEO of GBTA, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating today's discussion. I'm here today with Delphine Millot, GBTA's Senior Vice President on Sustainability and Advocacy, as well as our Managing Director of the GBTA Foundation. Welcome, Delphine.
Hi, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here.
You recently returned back to New York City from a week in Dubai at the United Nations COP28 climate conference. And it's the first time GBTA was present there. We're so glad that you could attend. The GBTA Foundation and you were granted official observer status for this conference. And to start off today, I thought I would ask, could you please tell us what that means? I mean, does every attendee there were tens of thousands, have to be granted this official status? And if not, what special access did this grant you?
Sure. So first of all, it was a real honor and privilege to be in Dubai for COP28 and be representing the full global business travel industry. So in terms of the status that we're having with the GBTA Foundation, it actually allows us to be official participants to the COP as part of the UNFCCC process, which is the Framework Convention on Climate Change. So there are three categories of participants who are actually officially there under the COP with access to the blue zone, which is where the negotiations are happening. So there are the representatives of the parties who are the actual negotiators sent on behalf of the governments. You've got all of the members of the press and the media, and I'm sure you've seen a ton of media coverage on what's happening at COP. And the third category are actually the representatives of these observer organizations who are really there to represent the civil society. And this is the status that we got with the GBTA Foundation. This is really because we have a mission to be driving climate action and championing climate action in business travel, and the alignment between these advocacy goals and the work of the COP gives us this, special status and official observer status that we got for Dubai and COP28. Actually, the parties officially added GBTA and the foundation on the list of participants. But this is, one-off process. So from now on, we are part of this process as official observers for all of the COPs to come.
It's amazing, an amazing achievement. So well done, really well done. Now that you're back and you've had time to reflect on this, I know it was a whirlwind 7 or 8, maybe even 9 days. What, if anything, surprised you about COP28, and what did you learn during the week that you'd like to share with our listeners?
So I did learn a ton, and also there are many things that surprised me because, as you said, this was my first COP, and I think what really struck me is the scale of the event. This is the biggest COP ever as well, and it's double the size of the COP last year, which was in Egypt, and which was also the biggest COP ever. So, when you've got close to 100,000 participants representing, the 193 countries that are part of the process, it's really impressive, and I have to say a little overwhelming as well, because there are so many discussions and events that are happening in parallel that are all super relevant. It's almost difficult to pick and choose where to be and what brings the most value. A second thing that really surprised me is the great level of cooperation and transparent collaboration between the public and the private sector, and also the civil society that's represented there. I thought that COPs were really, these high-level negotiations with the representatives from the governments, but actually there is a realization that the private sector needs to be part of these conversations, because they're going to have to implement the measures that are being discussed at the COP. So it was actually comforting to see this level of collaboration. Now, in terms of what I learned, I had the chance to, really dive into the process of the COP and how this type of intergovernmental negotiations work. It's incredibly complex because there are so many countries involved, so they actually group themselves in terms of regions and nominate countries to represent other countries. As part of the negotiations. So that's really also something that I learned in terms of how, negotiations work at that level. Something that I also reflected upon based on the discussions at COP is the understanding that climate change will only be tackled through a systems approach. So, in our industry, there are a lot of discussions about the technologies that are needed to take emissions out of air travel, but also, accommodation, ground transport. But with this systems approach, actually, what the realization is that solutions need to involve the finance sector because money talks, and without the financial community behind this transition, it won't happen. Discussions also need to happen with the energy providers and that's why there was a lot of debate around the fact that fossil fuels producing country, but also, direct operators are part of the discussions, but they are also the ones that need to transition to renewable energy. So it's very important that they are at the table. And, at the end of the day, what's happening at COP is about, the signal that goes to the markets and the policymakers back in those countries about the direction to head in. So it's a very important moment. And it was great to be there to witness these negotiations.
So much there to unpack. And I know in the time that we have left, I'd like to pick up on what you talked about, that the signal to markets, the signal to governments, certainly the signal to private sector, certain signal to travelers. I think there's signals all over in what you just mentioned. How hopeful does that make you that there is the will from among governments, businesses, NGOs, and companies that were present last week that we can make meaningful progress toward reaching goals in 2030 and, of course, ultimately 2050 toward necessary climate action?
Yeah, so that's a good question because I'm an optimistic person. I really went into this event believing in the power of multilateralism and the concept of, this convention on climate change and the COP. But yet, I experienced significant mood swings within the same day, based on the discussions I was part of and whether, I was talking to parties or members of the civil societies or climate activists that were represented at COP. I mean, the stakes are so high. It's just the future of humanity at the end of the day that we're talking about. And it's very daunting to be, discussing about the change that needs to happen. Everyone is, celebrating the progress that is being made, but also realizing that it's not fast enough and we are completely running out of time. There was also a fine line, and there are real tensions between the developed countries and the developing world that were represented. There was a lot of discussion about what a just transition looks like, because we are talking about phasing out from fossil fuels, but the developing world needs to, grow their economies. And there's also, monetary challenges that come with that. And a lot of the cleaner energies still come at a green premium. So there are real tensions, which are, of course, meaning that progress is being sold in many ways. But, still at the end of the day, we can see the glass half empty, and I will kind of see it half full. I come with a positive feeling around the fact that there's no debate in this forum around the science. The IPCC report was crystal clear. Climate change is real. A few years ago, there was still discussions around the science. So, everyone agrees on the fact that fossil fuels is an issue that we need to, phase down, if not phase out, and that we need to, agree on a timeline. There are still questions because the negotiations are still happening right now. So I don't have my crystal ball. I don't know if the language around the phase out or phase down is going to be back in the final text that is adopted at COP. But we are moving in that direction. And even, if it's not happening at this COP, the fact that fossil fuel is mentioned in the negotiation is very important. There is consensus around, what needs to be done. And now it's really about finding out how we do it and how we finance that transition. So, maybe just to conclude, because there are so many, media articles around whether COP is working or not. In my view, it has to work. This is the only way we're going to get global alignment between all of the countries in terms of, measures to transition out of fossil fuels and, triple, quadruple the amount of production of renewable energy. So, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm hoping the outcome will be positive, but again, we have to be celebrating the progress that has been done until now, because it was a long way to come. So it's great that it's heading in that direction.
Great insight. And thank you so much for spending all of that time at this event. I know it was, there was no weekend, as you've told us, when you came back. And I think the fact that it's still continuing now, even after you're back, means it's very important work and ones that we need to continue to focus on. So thank you so much for your time today, Delphine.
Thank you, Suzanne, for these great questions.
And thank you, everybody at home, for listening. This was The Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. Thanks so much.